welcome to this video lecture. And in this video lecture, I will be discussing previous year's NEET questions, and along with that, there will be discussions after every question. And this is for the chapter, as you can see, breathing and exchange of gases. This is part 2. If you like, you can go back and also watch part 1. I will put the link in the description box. Okay, so please check it out. Okay, so let's begin. And yes, before I begin, please keep a paper and pen handy with you so that you can note down all your options, your answers, and also note down the discussions after every question. Okay, all right, so let's begin. Okay, so we have the first question with us. Which one of the following statements is incorrect? Okay, incorrect. Please don't assume that it is correct and you tick the right answer, but that happens. So please read the question properly. Okay, and this question appeared in AIPMT 2006. So let's look at our options. We have A, B, C and D. Okay, so I would suggest you pause the video here, think about the answer and write it down on a paper. What you think is the right answer from these 4 options. Okay, and then we will go through all the options. Okay, so let's look at our options here. A. The principle of countercurrent flow facilitates efficient respiration in gills of fishes. Yes, that is correct. The residual air in lungs slightly decreases the efficiency of respiration in mammals. That is also correct. C. The presence of non-respiratory air sacs increases the efficiency of respiration in birds, which is also correct. D. In insects, circulating body fluids serve to distribute oxygen to tissues. Now, D is the incorrect statement here. So, what we have to do is which one of the following statements is incorrect. So, the correct answer will be D. Okay, so if you've written D as your option on your paper, that means you got the answer correct. So, let's look at the explanation. Okay. So now in fishes, there is a mechanism called countercurrent exchange. Okay, it's called countercurrent exchange and it helps to maintain a concentration gradient. A concentration gradient is maintained between the water, here you can see the water here, incoming water here, and the gills. Okay, so there is exchange of oxygen. Okay, there is exchange of oxygen from the water into the gills over here. So now you see deoxygenated blood is moving in from the gills over here, and you see water moving in, oxygenated water which is 100 over here, and as it's moving across it, the concentration is decreasing. So countercurrent means when the flow is in opposite directions. Okay, so you see this is high over here, so oxygen will move in from high to low. Okay, diffusion is happening from high to low, and so this increases the respiration efficiency in fishes. Okay, now this countercurrent exchange is also there in our body in nephrons. So when you study the excretory system, you will come across the same principle. It is the same principle over there also. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Okay. The presence of residual air in mammals is present even after forceful respiration. Okay, yes, after forceful expiration, after forceful expiration, residual air is still present in the lungs. So, the presence of low concentration of oxygen will affect the respiration efficiency. Now, we will see why and how that happens. Okay. Okay. Now, according to Guyton, now there's a textbook of medical physiology by Guyton. He's the author, and you will also come across this textbook when you're in the first year of MBBS. Okay, he has stated that the partial pressure of oxygen in atmospheric air is 159 mm mercury, but in alveolar air is 104 mm mercury. That means the pressure of oxygen in alveolar air is low as compared to the atmospheric air. Now, there are 4 possible causes why this happens, but we'll deal with only one of them in this particular case. Now, one of them is that alveolar air is partially replaced with atmospheric air with each breath. Okay, alveolar air is only partially replaced with atmospheric air with each breath, and this accounts to the low partial pressure of oxygen in the alveolar air. And this is due to the presence of residual volume and expiratory reserve volume in a normal breathing mechanism. Okay, so now in our case, just for example, we have, sorry about that, residual air here. Okay, I'll draw it a little bigger. You have RV. Okay, RV is residual volume. Okay, and atmospheric air enters. Atmospheric air enters and mixes with this residual volume. So the concentration or the PO2 is low as compared to the atmospheric air. Sorry. Here, PO2 is high in the atmospheric air. So now let's imagine a situation where there is no residual volume in the lungs. Now, okay, this is your lungs and there is no residual volume, only atmospheric air is entering. Okay, when atmospheric air will occupy this lung space here, and so your partial pressure of oxygen will be 159 mm mercury here. Okay, so that is why there is a difference, and that is why it will affect the respiration efficiency. Okay, all right. Next is, in birds, there are non-respiratory air sacs. Okay, you can see here there are air sacs. There's an anterior air sacs, posterior air sac over here. Okay, that pumps air through the lungs. The system is unidirectional. Okay, that is, the lungs do not expand and contract. Unlike in mammals, our lungs expand and they move, they expire, they inspire. Okay, they're moving in, out like that. But in birds, it does not happen. The posterior and the anterior air sacs are the ones that are increasing and decreasing in size. Okay, they're inflating and deflating in size. Okay, so this provides a constant flow of energy, a constant flow of oxygen, and hence provides energy needed for flight. Okay, so as you can see, in inspiration or inhalation, in trachea, the air moves in, it fills the posterior air sacs. So the air that was there in the posterior air sacs moves through the lungs and into the anterior air sacs. Okay, so there is oxygen, there is air flowing in the lungs at that time. Okay, similarly, in exhalation, the posterior air sacs, the air that's present in the posterior air sacs will again flow through the lungs into the anterior air sacs, and then that will remove, and the air that was present already in the anterior air sacs will move out. Okay, so there is a constant flow of oxygen in, or rather air in the lungs. Okay, that is why in non-respiratory air sacs they increase the efficiency of the birds, the respiration efficiency in birds. Okay. Now, oxygen in insects flows through the tracheal tubes. Okay, there are tracheal tubes and it flows through the tracheal tubes to the tissues. Okay, so there are no circulating fluids. Okay, there are no circulating fluids involved in the transport of oxygen. So that is why that was the incorrect statement. I know you have come across this question many times, okay, on the internet, and this is a very good question. So this question deserves a smiley face. Okay, this question deserves a smiley face because this is a very logical question, and if you knew your theory really well, then you would be able to answer this question correctly. Okay, so The answer to that was D. Okay, if you like, you can note it down, and we can move to the next question. Okay. Alright, next question. When 1500 ml air is in the lungs, it is called, okay, and this appeared in 1996. We look at the options. We have A, B, C and D. Okay, again I would suggest you pause the video and think about the answer, write it down, and then come back and look at what the right answer is. Okay, A, residual volume, B, inspiratory reserve volume, C, vital capacity, and D, tidal volume. So the correct answer is residual volume. So if you've written down A, that means you got the right answer. Okay, again, if you watched part 1, you would be familiar with these tables here. This one and this one. Okay, so if you remember these the volumes present in these tables, written in these tables, you will be able to answer that question. Now you must be wondering, it says 1500 ml over there, and how the residual volume is 1200 ml. How can you write like that? So in this particular question, we have eliminated the options. Okay. Again, we have inspiratory reserve volume, which is around 2500 to 3000 ml. So that can't fit that answer. We have vital capacity, which is about 3500 to 4500 ml. That again is not possible. And then you have what tidal volume. Tidal volume is 500 ml. Oops, sorry. Tidal volume is 500 ml. So again, that would not fit the answer. So the answer was residual volume. Okay. Alright, I hope this was pretty easy. This is simple. If you know the facts, you will be able to answer the question very easily. Okay. Alright, I hope you're enjoying this lecture, and we'll move on to the next question. 3. The ventilation movements of the lungs in mammals are governed by. This appeared in the year 1995. Alright, let's look at our options here. A, B, C and D. So again, pause the video, write down what you think is the right answer, and then come back and watch this video. Okay, so A is muscular walls of lung. No, not really. No, that can't be the right answer. B is diaphragm. Yes, diaphragm does play a role in the ventilation movement. C is intercostal muscles. Yes. D, both B and C. So the correct answer should be D. So if you've written down D, that means that you've got the answer correct. And let's look at the explanation here. Okay. The ventilation movements of the lungs are governed by the contraction and relaxation of the diaphragm and intercostal muscles. Right? So inspiration is an active process where diaphragm and the external intercostal muscles contract. Okay, and this allows the air to move inside, and when the muscles relax, the air expires. In inspiration, the diaphragm becomes flat. Diaphragm becomes flat and gets lowered by the contraction of its muscle fibers, thereby increasing the volume of the length of the thoracic cavity. Okay, it's not needed actually. Increase the volume of the length of the thoracic cavity. That means if you have the diaphragm here, again I will draw a bigger picture. Okay, so you have the diaphragm here. This is below, and I'll just draw box shaped lungs. So it is just to help you understand. Sorry. Okay, and so these are your left and your right lungs. So when this contracts, this moves down. Okay, the diaphragm moves down. Okay, and this increases the length, okay, of the thoracic cavity. Okay. The external intercostal muscles occur between the ribs. Okay. There are external intercostal muscles that occur between the ribs, and these muscles contract and pull the ribs and sternum upward and outward. Okay, so their job is to move the ribs and sternum upward and outward, thereby increasing the volume of thoracic cavity. So upward as in front and outward. So it will move this way. Okay, and upward here, upward and this way, transversely. Okay, so your thoracic cavity expands that way too. Okay, so that's how the intercostal muscles help. So what happens with that when the diaphragm moves down, thoracic cavity also moves upward and outward. This increases the pulmonary volume and pressure decreases. So the volume increases. This increases the pulmonary volume and pressure decreases. So air moves from the atmosphere into the lungs. Okay, so the answer is diaphragm and intercostal muscles. Okay, cool. Let's move on to the next question. Alright. In man and mammals, air passes from outside into the lungs through, and this appeared in 1994. Let's look at the options. We have A, B, C, and D. Okay, again pause the video and write down what you think is the right answer, and then we will come back. Okay, so A is nasal cavity, larynx, pharynx, trachea, bronchi, alveoli. No, not really. That is not the right answer. B is nasal cavity, larynx, pharynx, trachea, bronchioles, alveoli. Again, that is not the right answer. C. Nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchioles, bronchi, alveoli. Nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx. No. That is also not the right answer. So if you put C, that is also incorrect. Then D. Nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, alveoli. Yes, D is the right answer. Okay, this is factual based. If you know your theory, again, you will be able to answer this question very easily. You just need to remember the order in which the respiratory passageway exists in mammals. Okay, let's look at it a little bit of in detail. Air passes through the airway passage in the following order. Okay, so that's nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, alveoli. If you don't remember this, please go back to your notes, remember this, because this is very, very important. This has appeared in the exam, so it is important to remember this. Okay. Also, this is a diagrammatic representation. So you have a nasal cavity here, you have a pharynx here, and air is moving down through the larynx, then through the trachea, then you have your bronchus left and right, and then it moves inside. You can't see the bronchioles inside, but they are there. Bronchus and then bronchioles and then alveoli. Okay, so this is how the respiratory passageway is present in mammals. This is human. Alright, okay, let's move on to the next question. Alright, question number 5. The partial pressure of oxygen in the alveoli of the lungs is, this appeared in NEET 2016. Let's look at our options here. A, B, C, and D. Right? Again, pause the video, remind you, pause the video and write down what you think is the right answer, and then we'll come back. Okay. A. Equal to that in the blood. No. Partial pressure of oxygen in the alveoli of the lungs is not equal to that in the blood. More than that in the blood? Yes, it is more than that in the blood. Less than that in the blood? If it is more, then it can't be less than that in the blood. Less than that of oxygen, carbon dioxide? No. So, answer is B, if you've got that. then you got the right answer. Alright, let's look at the explanation. Again, this is factual based. You have your table in front of you. Okay, again, smiley mark. Okay, smiley man here. If you remember this table, you remember the values in the table, you will be able to answer all those questions related to partial pressure. Okay, if you understand, this was partly logical, partly factual. Okay, so if you remember this table, you will be able to answer the question. Okay, so alveolar air is 104 mm mercury and oxygenated blood is 95 mm, deoxygenated blood is 40 mm of oxygen. Okay, so if you remember these values, you will be able to answer this question. Alright, okay, let's move on to the next one. Question number 6. The figure given below shows a small part of human lung where exchange of gases takes place. Select the option which represents labeled part A, B, C or D correctly identified along with its function. Sorry, leave that. Ignore that line. Correctly identified along with its function. Okay, and this appeared in 2011. Let's look at our options A, B, C and D. Alright, again pause the video, think about the answer, write it down and then come back to this video. Okay, we have option A. C. Arterial capillary passes oxygen to tissues. Now C does not look like the arterial capillary, it looks like the venous capillary which is bringing in deoxygenated blood. Okay. A. Alveolar cavity, main site of exchange of respiratory gases. Yes, A is the right answer here because A represents the alveolar cavity where the exchange happens of gases happens. D. Capillary wall. Exchange of O2 and CO2 takes place here. Now, D represents the interstitial space that is present here. Okay, D is the interstitial space. And B, red blood cells transport of CO2 mainly, which is incorrect. B, RBCs don't only transport CO2, they transport oxygen also. Okay, so option B is the right answer. Okay, let's look at the discussion here. So C denotes venous capillary. Okay, C denotes venous capillary, which brings in deoxygenated blood and passes the CO2 to the alveoli. A denotes the alveolar cavity, okay, which is the main site of exchange of gases. D is the interstitial space, like I said, and B is RBC, which is responsible for transporting O2 and CO2. Okay, so this was basically the diffusion membrane. Okay, you see this diffusion membrane over here. Okay, so you have your interstitial space in between, you have your alveoli here, and you have your capillary membrane over here. Okay, so this is what it represents. Again, this is also important to remember, the order. The order is important to remember. Okay, so again, this is theoretical based, this is factual based. So if you remember this diagram, the order, then you will be able to answer the questions. Alright, this was pretty simple. This shouldn't have been complicated. We move on to the next one. Okay. The exchange of gases in the alveoli of the lungs takes place by, this appeared in 1998. Okay, and we will look at our options first. A, B, C, D. Again, pause the video and think about your answer. Write it down and then come back to this. Okay. Alright, so the exchange of gases in the alveoli of the lungs takes place by A, passive transport. Not really, we have to be more specific here. B, active transport. C, osmosis. D, simple diffusion. clearly, I mean, if you watched my part 1, I have clearly explained exchange takes place by the process of simple diffusion. Stick it into your head. It is simple diffusion. Okay. Okay, because passive transport is a very broad term. Even osmosis is the passive transport. But here, if you have to be specific, we've been given the option simple diffusion. Okay, so air will always move from high to low. Okay, high pressure, partial pressure to PAP to low partial pressure. That's how diffusion is taking place. This process is called simple diffusion. Let's look at the explanation. Yeah. So passive transport is the movement of molecules across a concentration gradient without the use of energy. Yes, that is also happening in simple diffusion. So passive transport is a very broad term. Active transport is the movement of molecules using ATP as energy. So this process requires energy. Okay. Osmosis is a type of passive transport where water molecules move through a semi-permeable membrane. Okay, they move through a semi-permeable membrane from an area of low solute concentration to an area of high solute concentration. Okay, so this is passive transport. So here water molecules move from area of low solute concentration to an area of high solute concentration. And let's look at simple diffusion. It is also again a type of passive transport where molecules move from high concentration solution towards a low concentration solution. That happens again across a concentration gradient. So hence gases in the alveoli move from high partial pressure towards a low partial pressure region. Okay, think of it as like a slope. Okay, high to low. So this concept needs to be very clear. Okay, because this is what is applied in exchange of gases, movement of inspiration, expiration, and all of that. Okay. I hope this was clear. So we move on to the next question. Okay, so question number 8. In lungs, the air is separated from the venous blood through, and this appeared in 1997. Let's look at our options A, B, C, and D. Okay, again, pause the video and write down what you think is the right answer and come back to this. Alright, so option A. Transitional epithelium plus tunica externa of blood vessel. No, that is incorrect. B. Squamous epithelium plus endothelium of blood vessel. That is correct. C. Squamous epithelium plus tunica media of blood vessel. That is not true. D. None of the above. That is, if you don't know any of them, you just tick mark on B, on D, none of the above. But anyway, yeah, you have to tick on the right answer, the right option, and that is B. So if you put option B, that means you got the correct answer. Okay, and I hope you know why you've ticked that as a right answer, because you need to know your theory. Okay, we will come to the theory now. Okay, again, this is related to the diffusion membrane. Okay, this is diffusion membrane. So just remember the air in the alveoli is separated by the epithelial cells of the alveoli here and this endothelium cells over here of the capillary. Okay, of the venous capillary. Okay, so if you remember this order, like I've already stated before, you will be able to answer this question correctly. Okay. Alright, question number 9. The alveolar epithelium in the lungs this appeared in 1990. Okay, and our options, let's look at them. Okay, we have option A, B, C, and D. Again, pause the video and write down what you think is the correct option and come back to this video. Okay, so the alveolar epithelium in the lungs is non-ciliated columnar, No. B. Non-ciliated squamous. Yes, 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 yes. C is ciliated columnar. No. And D. Ciliated squamous. No. So the option is B. The correct option is B. Okay. So need to remember alveolar epithelium in the lungs is non-ciliated squamous. Okay. Let's look at the explanation. The tissue present in the alveolar epithelium is non-ciliated squamous. Okay. They're thin-walled. Now the alveoli are very thin-walled. Okay, consisting of squamous epithelium and are interspersed with network of blood capillaries with elastic and reticular connective tissue fibers. Okay, and here you can see a diagram. So the type 1 cell here, if you study the anatomy of the alveoli, it's there in your NCRT. So type 1 cell are squamous epithelium. This is just a representative diagram of what the alveoli looks like, and you can see type 1 cell here, squamous epithelium, and they are thin. So it is easy for gas to move in and out like that. Okay. Alright. So this was pretty simple. This again is factual based. If you remember the fact, that's why it's important to study the fact. If you remember the fact, you can answer the question. Okay, it's all knowledge based. Okay, move on to the next question. Okay, so let's come to the 10th question. Identify the wrong statement with reference to transport of oxygen. Okay, wrong statement, please mind that. Now don't tick the correct statement. Come, oh no, what did I do? It's the correct statement. I was supposed to identify the wrong statement. No, please read the question carefully. Okay, with reference to transport of oxygen. This is quite recent. This was 2020. Okay, NEET. Now let's look at our options. A, B, C, D. Okay, again pause the video, think about the answer, write it down and come back to this video. Okay. Option A. Binding of oxygen with hemoglobin is mainly related to partial pressure of oxygen. Correct. Yeah. Binding of oxygen, yes, with hemoglobin is mainly related to partial pressure of oxygen. So this statement is correct. Partial pressure of CO2 can interfere with O2 binding with hemoglobin. Yes, that is also correct statement. So B cannot be the right answer, but you have to identify the wrong statement. Option C. Higher H plus concentration alveoli favors the formation of oxyhemoglobin. Really, I don't think so. No. C is the incorrect statement. So C is the right answer here. But we look at option D. Low PCO2 in alveoli favors the formation of oxyhemoglobin. Yes, D is the correct statement here, and what we have to do, we have to identify the wrong statement here. Okay, so the correct answer is C. So if you have typed C, written C, that means you've got the right answer. Now we look at this in detail. Okay, so I'm sure if you studied your NCRT syllabus, you are familiar with this diagram here. Okay, this is the dissociation curve, the O2 dissociation curve. Okay, now you see this line here, the curve before shift. Curve before shift. Okay, so at a particular PO2, you can find the percent saturation of hemoglobin. Now what is percent saturation of hemoglobin? That is the amount of oxygen that attaches to hemoglobin. Okay, so that much percentage of hemoglobin is saturated with oxygen. So that is dependent on the PO2, correct? So now what happens is when the curve shifts to the right, okay, shifts to the right and downward. Now this happens under these circumstances. Okay, this shift to the right happens under these circumstances. Okay, when there is increased hydrogen ions. Increased hydrogen ions means acidic. That means it's low pH. Okay. Increased hydrogen ions means low pH. Increased CO2. Okay. Increased temperature and increased BPG in hypoxia condition. Okay. So when these conditions are fulfilled, the shift happens. The curve shifts to the right. The curve shifts to the right means dissociation happens. Okay, dissociation of oxygen from hemoglobin happens. Okay, so our question was the incorrect statement over here. If you see, higher H plus concentration in alveoli favors the formation of oxyhemoglobin, which is incorrect. It is the opposite. Okay, decreased H plus concentration alveoli favors the formation of oxyhemoglobin. Okay, so that was the incorrect statement here. So if you remember this diagram here and this curve shift over here, you can answer this question. Okay, this is important to remember. I'll also come back to this to the table here. Yeah, so you can see this table here. If you remember these two tables, under what conditions association of oxygen with hemoglobin occurs and dissociation of oxygen with hemoglobin occurs. Okay, under these conditions, the following will happen. All right. So this was this was not a factual based question. This was application. Okay, so this deserves a smiley face. Okay, this question deserves a smiley face. Why? Because this was an application logical question. So if you knew your facts properly and you understood the concept, then you could have been able to answer the question correctly. All right. Okay. So if you like, you can note it down and we'll move on to the next question. All right. Reduction in pH of blood will disappeared in NEET 2016, and we will look at our option A, B, C and D. Again, I would suggest you pause the video, think about what the answer could be, write it down and come back. Okay, so we look at our options. A, decrease the affinity of hemoglobin with oxygen, release bicarbonate ions by the liver, reduce the rate of heartbeat, reduce the blood supply to the brain. I mean, out of all the four options, A is the right option here. No doubt about that. So A is the right option here. So reduction in pH of blood means it is acidic blood. That means there is high H plus ions. Okay, like I previously showed you the curve and the conditions in which the dissociation occurs. There is decreased affinity of hemoglobin with oxygen when there is increased H plus ion. That means there is reduction in pH. The other options, in the case of the other option, none of them occur. In this case, option A is the appropriate answer. Okay, let's look at the discussion again. We come back to the same diagram. Please remember this. This is very important. This smiley face. I will repeat it again. The big smiley face with the big face. So please remember this graph and the conditions. Okay, under what conditions this shift happens. Okay, this is very important. So like I said, increased hydrogen ions, the dissociation. That means decreased affinity of oxygen with hemoglobin. Okay. Yes. Again, we come back to this table. So this is an important table. Please remember these conditions. This occurs in alveoli, this occurs in the body tissues. So if you remember this concept, that's what, again, this was conceptual based, right? So if you remember the concept, you understood the concept, then you will be able to answer this question correctly. There should be no problem with you answering the question. Alright, so this was again conceptual. This was not a direct question where you could just apply. So where you could just write down if you remember the facts, but no, you have to think under what conditions, what could it be, read the question carefully and then answer. Okay. All right. So let's move on to the next question. approximately 70% of carbon dioxide absorbed by the blood will be transported to the lungs. And this appeared in NEET 2014. Okay, we'll look at our options A, B, C and D. Again, I would suggest you pause the video and write down what you think is the right answer, and we will come back to this. Alright, so approximately 70% of carbon dioxide absorbed by the blood will be transported to the lungs as bicarbonate ions. Yes, if you remember this fact, you will be able to answer this question correctly. It is by bicarbonate ions in the form of dissolved gas molecules. No. By binding to RBC. No. As carbaminohemoglobin. No. It is bicarbonate ions. The maximum amount of CO2 is transported as bicarbonate ions. Okay. Okay, we'll look at the explanation so you'll be able to understand it better. Okay, so 70% of carbon dioxide is dissolved in the 7%, I'm sorry, 7% of carbon dioxide dissolved in the blood plasma. 70% of CO2 is converted into bicarbonate ions, like I previously told you, transported in the blood plasma. Now what happens is carbon dioxide diffuses into the erythrocytes and combines with water to form carbonic acid. Okay. Now, once carbonic acid is formed, carbonic acid, the problem is an unstable compound, okay, and it quickly dissociates to form hydrogen and bicarbonate ions, okay, and this whole reaction takes place in the presence of the enzyme carbonic anhydrase, okay. So now what happens? Now bicarbonate ions have been formed. Now these bicarbonate ions move from the erythrocytes. They move from there into the plasma in exchange with chloride ions from the plasma, and this is called chloride shift. Okay, this whole process is called chloride shift, when chloride ions move in and bicarbonate ions move out of the erythrocytes, and then bicarbonate ions move through the blood plasma. Okay, you can see the reaction here, CO2 plus H2O, and then it forms H2CO3, and then HCO3 minus and H plus. So this is a reversible reaction, and this whole thing is happening in the presence of the enzyme carbonic anhydrase. Okay. So if you want to study more, please refer to Bose effect. Okay, Bose effect, you can study the transport of CO2 and O2 through the blood. Okay, Bose effect is very important. It will be there in your textbook. So this. If you understand Bose effect, you can understand how O2 and CO2 are being transported in the blood. Okay, and how the exchange is happening from alveoli into the blood, and then from blood into the tissues, and how the exchange is happening. Okay, Bose effect. And also this chloride shift is also called Hamburger's phenomenon, not the eating McDonald's hamburger. This is a person, a scientist who came up with this chloride shift, who discovered this chloride shift. Okay, Hamburger's phenomenon is another name for it. Okay, so this is it. And 23% of carbon dioxide is carried by hemoglobin. 23% of carbon dioxide is carried by hemoglobin, carbaminohemoglobin. So the right answer was bicarbonate ions. Okay, so this is it. Okay, so this is the end to our video lecture, and I hope you enjoyed today's video lecture, and I hope you've learned something new and noted it down for future reference. And so don't forget to like, share and subscribe to MJ NEET Biology, and I will see you in the next video lecture. Okay, bye.